Welcome to Deck Analysis and Testing. Today we are looking at LUNALIGHT. LUNALIGHT is a beast warrior deck that focuses around fusion summoning big beaters that protect themselves and hit hard. And no, you're not looking at the expensive version. That's because the new deck build box is only half the size of a mini box, so it's incredibly easy to get free copies of everything in the deck, including the ultra rares as well. The new support makes the deck better turn 1, and also opens up some powerful Xyz plays using the interaction between Yellow Marten and the non-once per turn LUNALIGHT Tiger. Let's have a look at the cards. We have done a video on this not too long ago, so I won't go into too much detail on the cards that already are in the last video, but let's have a look at the new cards at first. Is a LUNALIGHT Wolf. LUNALIGHT Wolf is a pendulum. You will usually just use it as a scale, so you won't be summoning it. As a scale, you can once per turn fusion summon using monsters from your field or graveyard, so it's really good as a follow-up. If you already have all of your LUNALIGHT monsters in your graveyard, you can just use them as a material using Wolf to make your big fusion monsters. This also gives you access to the big fusion monsters easier, because you can always just send the fusion materials with something like a Kaleido Chick, so you can use them in your graveyard to banish to make your bigger fusion monsters. Next is Kaleido Chick. Don't ask me why I have 4 copies of this card, I don't want to talk about it. Like Kaleido Chick has the effect to send a LUNALIGHT monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard as a cost, and then change its own name to that monster if it's used as a fusion material. Because it sends as cost, it actually doesn't trigger your LUNALIGHT monster's graveyard effects, because, for example, Yellow Marten has the effect when it's sent to the graveyard as a card effect to grab a LUNALIGHT spell trap, but because it sends as cost, it won't trigger that effect. But that also has its upsides, that because it still sends if it's negated, because it sends immediately before the effect even resolves. So for example, Emerald Bird summons it in defense position and also negates its effects, but even then you could still send a card using Kaleido Chick. Even though it won't be able to change its own name, you can still send something like a LUNALIGHT Yellow Marten, and that is a pretty good interaction. And also this effect gives you access to your bigger fusion monsters turn 1, because usually you will be using your LUNALIGHT fusion to fusion summon using your stuff from your extra deck directly. But if your opponent doesn't have a monster from the extra deck, you can't use that effect. So instead you can use Kaleido Chick to change its name to one of your fusion monsters, because the big fusion monsters require you to use other fusion monsters, so what you can do is you can send something like a Panther Dancer to change its name to Panther Dancer, and then you can fusion summon Leo Dancer by using Kaleido Chick that is treated as a Panther Dancer. Next is Yellow Marten. This is one of the old cards. If it's sent to graveyard, you grab LUNALIGHT Fusion, and also you can summon itself from graveyard by bouncing a face-up LUNALIGHT card, and that includes the pendulums. So LUNALIGHT Tiger is probably the best card you can bounce back with Yellow Marten, because it has a non-once per turn effect to once per turn special summon a monster from your graveyard. It is once per turn, but it's not hard once per turn. So you could use this effect multiple times in a single turn if you have multiple copies of it, or if you bounce it back with something like a Yellow Marten. So you can probably see how this card will interact with Yellow Marten and basically give you a lot of rank 4 material. Next is Crimson Fox. This is useful to negate your opponent's target effects and also change your opponent's attack to 0. Emerald Bird is a good card to send your stuff from your hand to your graveyard to trigger the graveyard effects, and also if it's used as a fusion material, usually with LUNALIGHT Fusion, you can summon back LUNALIGHT from your graveyard or banish zone. Next is White Rabbit. This is good to clear your opponent's back row and also summon back the stuff from your graveyard. Tenki is a good searcher. We have a lot of copies of this card now, because you can get that from one of the old boxes or the selection box, or probably you will get this from the deck build box, which is also a pretty good searcher. I have 14 copies of this card. I don't know how I got so many copies of this. And we have 2 copies of LUNALIGHT Fusion. This card is searchable, so I'm not playing free. You could search it off of Yellow Marten if it's sent to the graveyard with something like a Emerald Bird, But also, you don't actually need a Lunalight fusion that much anymore because Lunalight Wolf does fusion summon for you as well. And also, you could consider playing Black Sheep if you have it. I still don't have it right now, but if you have this card, you may want to consider playing a single copy of Black Sheep plus a Polymerization, because Black Sheep is searchable by Tenki. And if you don't have access to your fusion spell, what you can do is to grab Black Sheep with Tenki, and then pitch Black Sheep to add a Poly from your deck, and that gives you access to your fusion spell. And because Lunalight Wolf is a level 6 monster, it's actually not searchable with Tenki. And that is something you might want to keep in mind. Next is the extra deck. It's exactly the same as the one in the previous video. We're playing one Leo Dancer. This card is crazy. It's hard to summon, but it doesn't get destroyed by card effects, and also it cannot be targeted, so it's really hard for your opponent to get rid of. Most of the time you will want to summon this card no matter if you're going first or second, because if you're going first, this card is just a really big boss monster that's hard to get rid of, that helps you survive. In your second turn, this is just a really good OTK tool because it can attack twice, and also it destroys all special summoned monsters after it attacks. And that's crazy. Next is Panther Dancer. We won't summon this card, it's just used as fusion material. Next is a Saber Dancer. This is a slightly easier to summon than Leo Dancer because it only needs 3 Lunalight monsters instead of needing another fusion monster. So if you don't have access with Collider Chick, or if your opponent doesn't have a monster special summon from the extra deck, you will be summoning a Saber Dancer. This is slightly less good because it can be destroyed by card effects, but it still cannot be targeted. And also, it actually, most of the time, will have more attack than your Leo Dancer because it boosts its own attack according to the monsters you have in your graveyard or banished zone. And also, you can banish this card from your graveyard to boost your fusion monster's attack by 3000 until the end of the turn. That's crazy, but you can only do that not during the turn it's sent. So usually, what you can do with Collider Chick is on turn 1, you can, as an option, send Saber Dancer to your graveyard. If you, some reason, already have Yellow Marten or don't want to send Yellow Marten, you can choose to send Saber Dancer, and during your next turn, you can banish Saber Dancer to boost your fusion monster's attack to over 6000. And finally, we have Cat Dancer. This is the easiest fusion to make, but it's also the weakest. And you will only make this card if you probably don't have any other options. And also, this card is somewhat good at OTKing as well. If your opponent, for some reason, is immune to Leo Dancer's board wipe effect, then you might want to use Cat Dancer. And also, Leo Dancer only pops special summoned monsters. So if your opponent has a normal summoned monster that you want to get rid of, but you can't, you can use Cat Dancer and OTK through your opponent's monsters by using it with your Crimson Fox to change your opponent's attack to 0 and then attacking it twice, and that deals 5000 damage, which is normally enough, and unless your opponent has a life point boosting effect like the new Archive skill. But usually it will still be enough even if your opponent is using life point boost alpha. Next is the Xyz monsters. This deck has a lot of rank 4 access. We're playing Rebellion, Magnus, and Dreadnoid to summon it. For the skill, we're actually not playing any of the exclusive Lunalight skills because those don't really do too much to the deck. So instead, we're playing Attack Burst. Attack Burst increases the monster's attack by 500 until the end of the turn, but the attack becomes a 0 when the turn ends. So what you can do with this skill is, because if you look at the stats of Leo Dancer, it's at 35, which is really close to 4000, but it's not quite 4000. So if your opponent has a full board of defense position monsters and you really want to OTK, what you can do is you can boost the attack of Leo Dancer to 4k, and then attack one of your opponent's monsters, and then wipe the board, and then attack directly, and that will be exactly lethal. And usually, Leo Dancer will win you the game on its own, so the downside doesn't really matter too much, but you do have to be really sure that you can OTK when the turn you activate the skill, otherwise your Leo Dancer will go down to 0 and you'll probably lose the game on the spot. We actually don't need an expensive version. I didn't make one because the free-to-play version already uses a lot of expensive cards, usually used in the expensive version, but because of the new box, it's a lot easier to get. Our opponent is playing Live Twin, and we're going second. This guy does really prefer second because LUNALIGHT Fusion can use stuff from the deck or extra deck as material if your opponent controls a monster fusion summoned, summoned from the extra deck. So it's really nice if our opponent is playing extra deck monsters, which our opponent is in this case. And during our turn, we're just going to activate LUNALIGHT Fusion straight away. We're going to make Leo Dancer, and we're going to straight to battle. We're just going to battle. We don't have to activate anything else. I guess we'll activate Crimson Fox because it reduces our opponent's attack to 0, which helps us OTK. We'll also grab a spell, I guess. We'll activate Attack Burst, and we'll just attack, and then attack again. That's it, because this card cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects, so all of our opponent's set cards do absolutely nothing, and that is usually how you will win most of your games. In our second game, we're playing against a Speedroid, and our opponent is going first, which is wonderful. We always want our opponent to go first. We do open with LUNALIGHT Fusion, so even under our opponent's Crystal Wing, usually Crystal Wing does give us a bit of a headache because we want to search LUNALIGHT Fusion by pitching Yellow Marten and activating its effect to search Fusion, but because we already have it in our hand, that isn't too big of a problem. Our opponent is going to combo off, and even with the skill nerf, they could still very easily make 2 Synchro monsters on field, 1 Crystal Wing and 1 Clear Wing. So they're going to make the Clear Wing first, and then activate their skill to give them a tuner, and then make the Crystal Wing. And they're going to very easily summon the second Clear Wing from their extra deck, and they're going to end turn with those 2 monsters on field. And even though that's technically 2 negates, Crystal Wing, Clear Wing Synchro Dragon only negates monster effects that target it, or monster effects from level 5 or higher monsters. We're going to attempt to bait the negates out, but he does have a Veiler, so it doesn't really work, but we can still play from here. We're actually going to sequence this in a very specific way. As you can see, we actually send the Crimson Fox first, and then send the Yellow Marten to the graveyard. That's determined by the order you pick the cards for your fusion summon. And what that does is, you can see, it chain blocks our opponent's negates. So the Crimson Fox activates its effect first because it's sent into the graveyard first, and then we activate the Yellow Marten, and he will negate the Yellow Marten, but it doesn't negate the Crimson Fox, which turns his attack to 0, so we can just use Attack Burst and attack for game. That is another interaction that you might want to consider. In our third and final game, where we usually play the expensive version, we're still playing the same deck because this deck is already good enough as is. Our opponent is going second, unfortunately, which means we can't use LUNALIGHT Fusion to Fusion Summon using the extra deck as material directly, but we do have access to Kaleido, which changes its own name to Panther Dancer by sending a Panther Dancer to the graveyard, so we can still make Leo Dancer turn 1. This is what we will usually do when we go first. We're going to still make a Leo Dancer and then use the Emerald Bird to summon back the Kaleido, and we can use Kaleido to send the Yellow Marten, and even though its effect gets negated, it doesn't really matter because it sends for cost. And then we can activate the graveyard effect of Yellow Marten to bounce back the Kaleido for next turn. Our opponent is playing the Evil Twins once again, and they're going to just do their 1-card combo. They do have an out to Leo Dancer in the form of their main deck monster, Evil Twin, Kill, and Leela. That card has more attack than Leo Dancer, so we're just gonna hope that he doesn't have it in his hand, which he thankfully doesn't. He's gonna activate EO Diversity, which I'm not really sure what that accomplishes, but let's see what he can do. Now in turn, he's gonna summon back the thing when we threaten to battle, which is fine. He still can't pop our fusion. We're gonna attack his monster, but he has the field spell, which is I'm really not sure why would anyone play the field spell. It's just not very good. But it does counter our fusion monster in this very specific scenario because the field spell doesn't target, so it still negates our attacks and also prevents us from dealing a lot of damage to him. And also he has the life point boost from the skill, which makes it even harder to OTK, but as long as he doesn't draw the Evil Twin main deck monster, we will be fine. He's going to Ballista Squad pop our Tenki, preventing us from getting a search, but that is okay. We can still summon a Collider Chick, which he will attempt to pop again with a second Ballista Squad, but we can negate that with Crimson Fox in the graveyard, and unfortunately giving our opponent more life points, which is really not ideal. But Collider Chick allows us to send the Saber Dancer to the graveyard, so if he survives another turn, we can at least boost our own Fusion Monster's attack to 6,000 and hopefully deal a whole bunch more damage. And our opponent is going to activate their skill, and they're going to summon Kizakill again, summon Leela, and at this point I'm just praying that he doesn't have the Evil Twin in his hand, otherwise we are in a really bad position. As you can see, we don't really have a lot of cards in our hand, because the turn 1 Leo Dancer is really resource extensive. So if our opponent can out our Fusion, we're basically dead on the spot. But thankfully, he doesn't seem to have another copy of the Evil Twin in his hand, and instead he's just going to activate another EO Diversity. I don't really know what he's trying to do with that. But without any backward to protect him, I don't think he could survive for very long. He could negate the first attack, but this monster can attack twice, so we can just attack again, and that will be game.